Well, this is the low light of the program. And the best news I have for you is that the highlights are coming. The highlights are coming because the highlights are all about hearing your stories. Stories of donors who have been called by God to make a difference in a young man or woman's life, knowing that without that contribution, that this student wouldn't have an opportunity to have the kind of education that they can get at Charleston Southern. It's about those stories. It's also about the student. And we'll get to hear those stories here momentarily. And a student who will be able to stand and say, representing thousands upon thousands of students just this year alone, not counting those who in the decades gone by who have had the opportunity to have this kind of education. Some of whom are sitting in this room today with grayer or lesser hair than they had when they were here before. And so this is why this particular event is the most exciting time we have on campus all year. It's about hearing the stories of how God touches the heart of men and women so they can use the blessings that God has given them, and they are just channeled through them to somebody who wouldn't have the opportunity without those gifts. That's why this is an exciting day for us. I spent a long time in the U.S. military, and I had the great fortune that some of you who are somewhat older than I didn't have. Because some of you who came in previous generations, when you got home from your combat experiences, you weren't welcomed home the way that I was welcomed home. And so I don't really fully understand, although I know it, I don't fully understand the experiences you had. All I know is the experience that I've had. And thank God the combat experiences that I've been engaged in all these years, every time I got back and for decades after, if I was at a lunch or if I was someplace in a uniform, somebody would come up to me without fail and thank me for my service. And I would simply say, thank you for your support. Because the fact is, if it wasn't for people back at home supporting us, those who have to go and do wouldn't have that opportunity. I've always loved the Bible for all sorts of reasons, not the least of which is every time I read it, I see myself in it. And often I don't like what I see. I love the Bible because when the Bible speaks, the Bible doesn't pull any punches. The Bible doesn't mince any words. The Bible never says things like, if you're a Christian or a person of faith, then you're going to be a nice person and things are always going to go well with you. In fact, quite the opposite is true. Many of the books that are written in the Scriptures are written because people like me misbehaved. And so 1 Corinthians is one of those books in the Christian Scriptures that speaks to this point. And if you know the story, you know that the Apostle Paul is a little bit fed up with some of his friends in this town called Corinth. And in this town called Corinth, there were people who were being divisive, and they were segmenting themselves out into various camps. And one said, well, I'm going to follow Apollos. And one said, well, that's good for you, but I'm going to go with Cephas. And others said, I'm going to go with somebody else. And Paul comes along and says, well, let me tell you how this deal works. And I look in 1 Corinthians chapter 3, and this is what the Apostle Paul says after kind of getting on their case for a couple chapters prior. He says, what after all is Apollos and what is Paul? Only servants through whom you came to believe, as the Lord has assigned to each his task. I planted the seed, Apollos watered it, but God made it grow. So neither he who plants nor he who waters is anything, but only God who makes things grow. The man who plants and the man who waters have one purpose, and each will be rewarded according to his own labor. For we are God's fellow workers. You are God's field, God's building. When I read this passage that is about the local church, I see this university in every element of this passage. What I see is that there might be some who would say, well, you know, the most important person at the university is the faculty. Because if you don't have the faculty, you don't have classes. And I would say, well, you got a point. Others would say, yeah, the faculty, they're important, but if they go away, we can get new faculty. What really, you know, the backbone of the university are the staff members. The staff members who work behind the scenes and people that you don't see, people in offices and cubicles who are making things happen. And we would all say, well, you got a point there. Because the first time a faculty member doesn't get a paycheck from the person in the room who sends the paycheck, they're not coming back next month. You got a good point there. Or somebody might say, well, what about the students? Obviously, if you don't have any students, you don't have a university. Obviously, if you don't have any students, you have no reason to exist. And I would say, well, you got a point there. And then there's everybody else. Notice nobody ever says the president is the most important person. But there's everybody else. And in this passage, what I see is God saying to those of you who have been blessed by God with resources, and because God has touched you in a way that only you can describe, and for reasons that I might not be able to completely understand or explain. I've heard many of your stories, and you say, I don't know why God has blessed me the way He has, but I do know what He's commanded me to do is to use myself as a funnel, and blessings come down so that I can be a blessing to other people. And that's what God's called me to do. The reason that I so enjoy this event is because we get to put together those funnels from God to those recipients of God, and we realize that, as the passage here said, we're all in the same game. We're all serving for the same purpose, and that purpose is to glorify God and bless others, so that the graduates of this university can cross a graduation stage at some point in the not too distant future and then go and change the world. I love the fact that the Bible here talks about a reward down the road. You probably won't be able to calculate the extent of the reward that you will get one day because of how you're being used by God as a funnel for His blessings. But today's luncheon is a down payment. You see, you get to sit around the table with people who have no idea how God's going to use them, and that's okay because God has an idea how He is going to use them. He has an idea, and He can already see how your gifts are going to be multiplied many times over, so that thousands, perhaps hundreds of thousands of people will be touched as a result of the work that one student does in the course of their lives because of your generosity. Because you understand that God can use your money a lot more effectively than you can. The reason I love this event is because a student gets to sit there, and many of them will say to themselves, if they haven't already said it to you, you know, I wouldn't be here today without you. I don't know where I would be. I don't know how God would have used me in other ways. I know He would have because He does. But He sent me here. And because I've been able to come here, because I've been able to spend these 4 years learning about what a biblical worldview is all about, and learning that every decision must be filtered through this worldview that says that God owns everything, that God is in charge, that God has a plan for my life. And that I'm here to absorb from these faculty and to learn from these staff members so that I can become a technologically savvy, critical thinking problem solver who knows how to communicate well, who knows how to speak well and write well, and something as simple as write an email well. Because students, your boss the first time or two will be okay with it, but that third time you might be looking for a new job. See, this is why this event is so spectacular. Because you get a glimpse, a mere glimpse of what God is in the process of doing and what He is going to do. Because every one of these students and the other thousands that will be walking by as we're having this great meal, every one of them will be used by God to touch others. That's why we're so excited about our strategic plan, which has just been published and is in the process of just beginning to be implemented. And that strategic plan talks about the purpose of our existence, which is the Great Commission. It talks about the how of our existence, and the how of our existence is that we produce academic excellence in a Christian environment. It reminds us that this is a Christian university, but it's not a university just for Christians. Because there are all kinds of people here who don't understand the Christian life as we do, but perhaps one day will. There are all kinds of students here who come from different faith backgrounds, but they come here because that they know that here we recognize that God is the author of all truth, and that in every classroom led by a faculty member who loves the Lord imperfectly often, but loves the Lord nonetheless, that in that classroom they will not just be a teacher who is good at their discipline, they will also be a disciple who is good at their devotion. As they become themselves the man or woman of God that He is designing them to be, they get to spill over and pour into young students who are on that same journey, on that same path. We have what we call in our strategic plan a passport to purpose. And this passport to purpose understands that certainly in this generation, more so than any others in our lifetime, there are students who have no sense of purpose, no sense of meaning in this life, and we argue forcefully that we think that's because the culture at large, the society at large, has pulled away from the God who made them and loves them. And because of that, they are wandering in a wilderness of meaninglessness and purposelessness, and we get to come on scene and say, you don't have to live like that. You don't have to go through your entire life not knowing why you're put on the planet. And that's why that first destination in our passport to purpose, that freshman year, we help students discover their passion. Discover what you're passionate about. Discover who God is and why He made you. And in the sophomore year, we get to explain to them how they can develop a pathway to connect that passion and to equip themselves for what's coming down the pike. And that sophomore year, when they have to pick a major, we've helped them hone from the passion into the major, and they pick the pathway. In the junior year, we help them develop their potential. As they develop their potential, taking upper level courses in even smaller classes, when they rub elbows with faculty members and do research together and do projects together and drink coffee together and discuss life together and talk about what life is all about, so that as they get ready for that fourth destination, which really is the beginning. That fourth destination is declaring their purpose. You see, in these 4 years, we help a student understand that they can have purpose, and we connect them from passion through pathway to potential to purpose. And when they leave this university, they certainly have every reason to believe that there's a God who made them and loves them and wants the best for them and has a wonderful, marvelous, fantastic, terrific plan for their life. And we've equipped them with the skills and the thought processes and the attitudes and the resilience and the biblical knowledge so that they can, whatever the situation, whatever the conversation, whatever the discussion, they can say, this is what I need to do, is the right thing to do, because they have become not just a person who is trying to get a credential or start a career. They've become a person who has developed their character and their calling, so that they can be committed to the things in this life that matter the most. And that's why when people say, hey, should I give my money to Clemson or should I give it to Charleston Southern? Clemson doesn't need your money. That's all I'm telling you. There ain't no legislator writing a check to build any of these buildings. Ask Dr. Hunter, he'll tell you. You see, here, from day one to graduation day and beyond, they know who they are. They know why they're here. And they know that one day there'll be a reckoning as they stand before God. And He says to them in so many words, I gave you one life to live. What'd you do with it? Thank you, students, for being amazing. If you like the people at your table, there are thousands more just like them. Hundreds more will show up next year, and hundreds more the year after that, in perpetuity. And as you establish scholarships and give to our scholarship funds, one of these days, you will have the great honor, joy, and privilege in the scheme of eternity, which never ends, to give from heaven. I can't think of a better way to invest your dollars for the glory of God and the good of His people than that. Thank you for being that kind of person. And if you'll join me in giving yourselves a hand, God bless you all.